if I stick to the plan, I stick to the procedure, it's going to work for me. And I'm very OCD and ADHD. So it's like I found like as soon as I got on that regimen, I'm like, to a T, that is my pattern. And I worked with it and I started cleaning up my scalp. Within months, I was having a much cleaner scalp. I started growing some hair back, some like more follicles were coming through. I was actually able to start growing my hair again. I was starting to get some thickness. I started working on my stress. I completely changed my diet. I started getting back into everything and I started actually caring about what I was internally and externally.
Welcome to HairPod, the podcast where you get to hear real people talk about their hair journeys. Hair loss happens to people at different times and for different reasons, so each story is as unique as the next. I'm your host, Kevin Ralston, and each week I get to interview people from different walks of life who've all been through hair loss in some form or fashion and have found a way to get their confidence and their hair back. Our guest today is Dan Medeiros. He's been passionate about music for his whole life, and he began playing guitar at just 9 years old. And now he's a professional musician, model, and actor, and he is no stranger to the spotlight. So I was surprised to learn that Dan was actually a pretty shy kid, and it was through performance and music that he was able to overcome his social anxiety.
Yeah, incredibly shy. I found it hard to talk to people, look people in the eye, and I only kind of responded when talked to, and most of my talking was with, friends I was close enough with, but just socially awkward. And music had been in the family for a long time. It's something that I fell deeply into even before I started playing guitar. I used to create my own guitars and stuff like that using wood and fish string and all that stuff. And would,
Wow.
I'd have like the top 20 countdown going on MTV, and I'd be just rocking out, pretending I was a rock star and hoping one day I could actually do that for real. Yeah. And then by the time I turned 9, I was finally able to start playing guitar. My parents got me an acoustic, and I went into lessons with the Ontario Conservatory for the next 7 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it just, I said music was in the family. So I was always able to hear things and just learn really quickly when it came to music. And it's been my way of sort of expressing myself over the years. All of my art, all of my writing, everything has been based around music and what it's done for me.
How do you go from being a shy kid, flipping that switch, and then all of a sudden now you're okay with being in the spotlight? Because you've done some acting as well, right?
Oh, yeah. I do everything these days. Professional musician. I do acting. I do model work. Pretty much anything I can get my hands on. I also work with a group in Iowa called the Iowa League of Heroes. We're a select group of people who dress up as superheroes. We go visit the kids in the hospitals and stuff like that, visit at their homes. We do all sorts of events. And I mean, we live and breathe the characters. So, I mean, our suits are movie quality. I dress up as Superman. So, I mean, my suit is from Batman vs. Superman. It's like $2,000-$3,000 outfit that I wear. So
I've seen that stuff. Yeah.
So when we portray it, and we do not break character. These kids, we want to give them hope and give them, the ability to see their heroes in real life. And it's an incredible experience, not just for them, but for us as well. It's worth every moment. I drove out to Lincoln, Nebraska one year. I met with this kid whose favorite superhero was Superman. Everything was Superman. He wore his cape and his Superman shirt all day. He was, dealing with lymphoma, and spent I don't know how many hours just hanging out with him that day. And we know that about a year later, he went into remission. And, every once in a while, the parents will reach out to me and just kind of give me updates on him. And it's amazing.
Just hearing what Dan's been able to do for those kids will blow you away. As host of the KBJ show in South Florida, we have partnered with the children's charity that's been around now for 25 years that helps kids in area hospitals and shelters. So seeing what a performance can do to brighten a child's life, I just know what kind of contribution Dan is making. And look, on Dan's part, It's going to take a lot of strength just to show up like that and give these kids and their families the hope and confidence they need. And the kids we deal with little smiles, many of them are going through chemotherapy, so they too have their own hair struggles. And hair loss works with kids just like them, so they can also get their confidence back. So I've seen directly the kind of impact that people like Dan can have. And just like adults, kids get a smile on their face. You can tell they have more confidence. So if you can feel it, why wouldn't they feel it? And that's why this episode is so special to me. Well, confidence is one thing. Stress, on the other hand, can be totally debilitating. And Dan started to experience some hair loss as he was just coming into adulthood. He was under tremendous stress, which caused a decline in his overall health and the health of his hair.
I'd say when I really started to notice it was after high school, early college. I was working myself to the bone between school and work, trying to afford college and trying to keep my car from overheating on a daily basis to and from. If I found $5 worth of cash, I was like, oh my gosh, I have gas money. I can actually make it home from school today. Running yourself ragged in the stress, and stress doesn't work out too well for me, as I came to realize as I started getting older. I wasn't invincible anymore, and stress started taking over, the out of control with fast food and just an unhealthy lifestyle, because essentially I just wasn't happy anymore. And the stress of my full-time job, which, I saw people break down and cry and go on stress leave for 6 months. Within a year of doing the job, it gutted half my head. I was freaking out, wasn't sure what to do anymore. I went from luscious hair when I first started to, barely anything left. I was gaining weight, all sorts of stuff. My scalp, and when stress comes out physically on me, so it came out on my scalp, it was like a minefield up there. Like, it was constantly on fire and pain, itchy. It was a mess. I remember breaking down crying with my doctor, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I've completely lost myself, who I am, how I am, and I don't know what to do anymore. And it took some, trying different things until eventually, I remember staying up really late one night. And again, I saw the hair club infomercials, and I'm like, I've been seeing these for years, and I think it's time I go check it out. So I checked it out, and I got an appointment consultation, and I will never forget what the consultant said to me. The very first thing, they're like, you have landed in the BMW of hair care and all that. And I was like, I hope so, because I really need some help here.
What was your hair loss looking like? Because everybody seems to have their own patterns. There's different patterns for hair loss. Some people lose to the front. Sometimes it's in the back. Were you losing patches of hair? What was your hair loss looking like, and how severe was it?
It was just, it started with the temples and then right in the middle of the forehead, and it just started thinning, and it got thinner and thinner. So, styling my hair, it's like, oh my gosh, there's the thickness is gone. It's scalp now. So I'm having to completely change up how I style my hair to try and hide it, and cutting it short, keeping it short. And it, again, just wasn't me anymore. I couldn't grow my hair out long anymore. I had to essentially hide it constantly and find ways to hide it. And if, God forbid, there was some wind and
right.
It's just like, oh my gosh, it's like I can't even bring myself to go to work right now because I'm just embarrassed to be out in public.
Yeah. We're talking about your confidence takes a massive hit. And for somebody like you're used to being a performer. You're somebody that's used to being on stage, acting, doing all that kind of stuff. And I do something relatively similar. I got to tell you, when you don't have confidence, one of the hardest things to do is to grab a microphone, to be on a camera, to be in front of a bunch of kids, whatever it is. And it is kind of weird how just your hair can affect overall that attitude. Did you have some of the same feelings? Was it harder for you to perform and do some of the things you love to do when you're having your hair struggles?
Oh, it was extremely difficult. I mean, it's, it takes a crazy emotional toll on you. And it absolutely did with me. I couldn't look in the mirror anymore without wanting to just break down crying in my hands. I could no longer look people in the eye. I had to wear a hat anytime I performed because I'm under lights. I'm in the middle of a spotlight. It's just me on stage. I don't have a band hiding me or anything like that. I'm right out front and center, and I found it hard to do that anymore. I found it hard to even want to leave the house and go to a show. There was a lot of times I didn't even want to go. I just wanted to stay home and not perform.
Yeah. Do you remember any kind of moment where you said enough's enough? Because you wound up at the hair club and you wound up at the right place. But what was that moment that just said, okay, I got to make this happen? What did it for you?
When I first joined with Hair Club back in, it was 2009 going into 2010.
Was it the commercial that woke you up? Was that it? You knew you had a problem and it just that opened your eyes?
I mean, I known I'd had problems for a while. I just, I just so badly wanted it to just be a scalp issue. So I tried dermatologists, I tried everything. And it was just when none of that helped and when I wasn't gaining any hair back, I was just losing it. It was just, like I'd always known about Hair Club. It was just taking that leap, making that phone call. And honestly, I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do is to make that initial call, set up that initial consultation. That is the hardest thing to get over. And once you get over that hurdle, you realize just what you've been missing. And I wish I started earlier. I wish I allowed myself to take that step, but I didn't.
Hey, I know there's a lot of people out there that can relate to this. No matter what type of solution you're seeking, those first steps tend to be the hardest ones. I know. I've talked about this on the podcast before with my own first steps. But the first time I tried to go to the hair club, I didn't even go in the door. I turned right around, I went home. Weeks later, as I looked back in the mirror and I said, hey, this isn't going to fix itself, I finally went back, and I'm so glad I did. That's why I want to talk to so many people about their own hair loss struggles, because I know firsthand what it's all about. And I also know what a relief it is when you've got a full head of hair that gives you that confidence. So as hard as it can be to take that leap, for Dan, it was even harder just to keep going with the way things were. Hair loss can come with a real emotional toll. And like so many people out there, Dan tried a few treatments before settling on something that actually worked for him.
I started off with the EXT program, which is a lot of scalp care and hair care. I was going in for appointments to have my under the lasers, scalp massages, and all sorts of stuff, going on the minoxidil and, taking the vitamins to help increase hair growth and a healthy scalp. And I went on the regimen because I'm like, if I stick to the plan, I stick to the procedure, the process, it's going to work for me. And I'm very OCD and ADHD. So it's like I found that as soon as I got on that regimen, I'm like, to a T, that is my pattern. And I worked with it and I started cleaning up my scalp. Within months, I was having a much cleaner scalp. I started growing some hair back, some more follicles were coming through. I wasn't losing as fast anymore. I wasn't taking a shower and having a clump in my hand or anything. That worked great for me. I was actually able to start growing my hair again. I was starting to get some thickness, and it was just essentially all around a great candidate for the EXT for regrowth. I started working on my stress. I completely changed my diet.
Yeah.
Diet's a huge thing as well. I started, going for walks again, and then eventually I started playing hockey again. I'm Canadian, so for me not to play hockey for a long time, I was like, yeah. So I started getting back into everything, and I started actually caring about what I was internally and externally. I had friends who helped with that, especially getting me out, getting into fitness and playing hockey again. And between everything, every avenue, I wanted to make sure that in any way, shape, or form, I could help and benefit me, my growth, my stress levels, everything. I did it. And it worked so well. 2010 through to 2012, I did that. And then I moved down to Iowa in the US. And so the Des Moines Center became my new home center. I continued with that process for years. And then it was 2014. I was like, I've gone as far as I can go. I need more. I want more, not just for me, but also my wife. She met me back in the early days of social media.
About what year did you meet your wife? So we can kind of follow the progress here.
We were both in high school at the time. So it was like the very early days, I think just the early days of MySpace, pre-MySpace.
Okay.
When online dating was still pretty new.
Maybe like 2004, somewhere around there. Is that what we're talking about?
I think it was around 2002. Maybe
Okay.
2002, 2001, 2002.
Okay. So we're talking about 10 years in the process of this. So your wife knows you for a good 10 to 12 years before, you're like, okay, I want to reintroduce you to the guy that you once knew.
Exactly. And, she, despite where I was with everything and she still married me, thankfully.
Yeah, that's love.
Yeah. So 2012 through to 2014, I was still just doing the EXT, and, she would see how just sad I would get and still breaking down crying in front of the mirror, and just, I don't know what else to do anymore. I've reached my limit. I think I can't get any more out of this. So she actually pushed me into, looking into alternatives with Hair Club, maybe taking the next step. What they call the X-Trans Plus is actually called the Matrix System. I still love calling it the Matrix System just because Matrix is a cool
Sounds
name.
cool, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, well, maybe she's like, well, take a look and see what the options are. So I met at my center with the center manager at the time, talked about, whether surgery or the Matrix System. And
what is that consultation like when you sit down with somebody there and you talk to them? Do you show them what the loss is? Do they talk to you about what you want to look like? How does that process go down, and how did you decide on the treatment that they walked you towards?
Oh, it's incredible. They essentially let you you lead and they support you.
Okay.
So that, they let you ask you, about yourself, what you do, when you started, sort of a lot of the questions you asked, when you started noticing that you were losing it, what factors do you think came in with it, and what you're looking for, So I even found pictures of myself back when I had the early days of selfies, before they were called selfies. It was just a webcam. And, I'm just like, this is what I used to have. I had wonderful hair, thick hair. I had
Right.
amazing hair. My mom, she was a hairstylist for years back when I was a kid, before she stopped doing that. And so I was just always, I loved what I could do with my hair and the different styles. And the 80s and 90s were fantastic for that. So yeah, so it just, that was a big thing for me. And then it not being able to do that anymore. It's just, it's absolutely crazy. But yeah, my wife pushed me into asking the next questions and what I could get. And so I showed them what I wanted to be again, who I saw myself as.
Yep.
The last time I looked in the mirror, I looked at a picture and said, that is me,
Yep.
beginning to end. And they were like, yeah, we can make that happen. So I moved over to the system, and within a month or so it came in, and I will never forget, it was a weekday night. I went to the center. They ran me through the whole process. It was very personalized, because it's a very scary, tough decision making these leaps.
It is.
Especially, I'm giving up what I've grown, what I've worked on.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the system on, they styled it, they cut it. And I was just like, it is insane just to see yourself again and go, oh my God, I still exist.
Yeah, right. It's kind of like you just take off this veil and bam, there you are. To me, what was amazing is how many years you roll back when you just have a system on. To me, it was really crazy. I immediately was like, I look 10 to 15 years younger immediately. I don't know if you had that same feeling. It's crazy what the hair does.
I remember seeing a picture of myself on a night out. It was Saturday night out downtown Des Moines. We were drinking with friends, and I saw the picture the next day, and it was with me and my wife. And I was like, oh my God, how old am I?
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, oh my gosh, that is awful. And then just coming home wearing hair that first night, I got it into the parking lot, and then my wife pulled in 5 minutes later, and it was kind of perfect timing. It was at night. It was one of those kind of out of a movie moment where I got in my car and I started walking down the parking lot, and she got out of her car, saw me, and started oh my God, and hands on her mouth, ran towards me, and we were both just in tears. And it was incredible, as I said, not just for me, but for her, and to see her look at me that way. And that very night, I took my very first selfie in years. And the first thing my friends see is when they look at it, they're like, oh my God, my friend is Clark Kent. So I was like, maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to that.
And those of us who have struggled with hair loss know just how isolating it can be. Look, it can be tough to reach out to somebody for help, especially if you don't know anybody else who's going through the same thing, or at least think you know somebody who's going through the same thing. So I asked Dan if he had any words of wisdom for somebody in the same position as he was so many years ago, dealing with the vicious cycle of stress and hair loss.
Oh gosh, I've thought about this a lot over the years. So, the first thing I'd tell my younger self before I started losing it would be, one, understand shampoos and conditioners a lot better and what's good for you and what's not good for you. Hair products again, same deal. Don't think that you can eat as much fast food as you want and not see the repercussions. It's never too early. It's also never too late. But, I wish I started earlier. I wish I started when I started noticing it. I could have salvaged a lot more, and I could have probably gotten myself back on track. Who knows? Again, it's all a bunch of who knows and maybes. But those were definitely a lot of the factors. My favorite thing is talking to people about this and helping others. And I've been being, not just a salesperson. I've been able to bring in friends, people who know me. I've been able to reach out to me and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were with Hair Club, and it's amazing. Give me the scoop. And I talk to them about it as someone who's a client. Giving them a full understanding of what it's like and not trying to just give them a sales pitch. And I've helped bring friends into centers and now they're just happier than they've ever been. And it's just like, it's as I say, the stigma that came along with what Hair Club used to be, it's not the 80s. It's not the 90s anymore. We're 2024 where this is normal. I feel like the stigma is just really, really out the door. It's a lot more accepted. And I love just how open and easy it is to talk to people about this stuff.
Yeah. And you want to share the joy. You got the joy. Your journey is filled with a lot of pain that didn't need to happen. And if you can spare anybody that same kind of feeling to get them right to the joy phase, it's a great thing that you're doing. And I think it's so fantastic. Everything you're doing, from your performances to your acting to especially what you're doing for those kids in the hospital, man. That's just one of the best things. It really was a pleasure talking to you, Dan. And I appreciate you sharing your story today.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Look, I think Dan's a great example of what can happen when you get the help that you need. I'm sure it's hard for people to understand just how devastating hair loss can be unless they've been going through it themselves. But one thing anyone can learn from Dan's story is how much becomes possible when you take care of yourself and find your confidence. Like so many of our other guests, Dan's hair journey has inspired him to help others through their hair loss. So if you know somebody who can relate to Dan's story, consider sharing this episode with them. And hopefully they'll feel a little bit less alone with what they're going through. Thanks for listening to another episode of HairPod. Check us out at Hair Club on Instagram or search us on Facebook and continue the conversation and let us know if this episode struck a chord with you. And if you're enjoying the show, consider leaving us a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. And if you haven't been over to our website yet, check it out by going to podcast.hairclub.com. Until next time.